My name is Nora Ashford, and last Christmas my own parents stood in front of the entire family and called me a freeloader to my face. I'd handed them a small wooden box I made myself, cut and sanded by hand. My mother set it off to the side like it was junk mail and asked the whole room, out loud, when I was finally going to stop living off other people. My father took it a step further. He shoved the box back across the table at me and said he didn't want my cheap little gift and that I should take it and get out. 19 relatives heard every word. I didn't cry. I didn't argue back. I laughed. Then I told them exactly what was sitting inside that box. And what happened over the next 3 days is the part not one of them saw coming. Now, about the box. Like most family blow-ups, this one started with a seating chart. I pulled up to my parents' place at 2:30, way ahead of everybody else, because my mother had asked me to come early and set the table. That chore had always landed on me. Never Marcus, never Kayla, me. I left my Silverado parked at the curb. It was 10 years old, close to 180,000 miles on it, and there was a fine layer of concrete dust on the dash that I could never fully wipe away no matter how many times I tried. Marcus's leased BMW was sitting in the driveway shining like something out of a car commercial. My mother had the front door open before I even hit the porch steps. Her eyes went to my flannel shirt, then my work boots, then the box in my arms in that exact order. "When are you going to learn to stand on your own 2 feet?" she said. That was my hello. The box was cedar. I'd cut it and fitted it together myself out in my grandfather's old workshop behind the garage, the space nobody bothered with anymore. I'd sanded the whole thing until it was glass smooth, then worked linseed oil into it until the grain came alive. What was inside was the reason I'd spent 4 hours on the road that morning, the day before Christmas. But she had no clue about that yet. "Just leave it on the sideboard," she said, flicking her hand toward the dining room. "Presents come later." She headed back to the kitchen. I carried the box through, past the living room, past the couch that still had plastic on the cushions because sitting on it wasn't allowed, and I set it down on the sideboard beside a row of framed photos. Every single photo was Marcus. Marcus in a cap and gown. Marcus and Kayla on their wedding day. Marcus shaking hands with some important-looking guy at a conference. There was one picture of me from middle school, tucked half behind a little ceramic angel. "I build things for a living, Mom," I said to the empty room. "The boots are the whole point." By 4:30, the house was packed. Aunt Diane showed up first, loud and drenched in perfume, holding a casserole and reciting the ingredients for the 3rd time. Then Uncle Gary and his wife. Then a wave of cousins, including Chloe, who was 23 and the only person in the family who ever bothered to text me back. My mother had the dining room done up with the good china. 10 seats at the main table, cloth napkins, candles. And then, way over against the wall by the kids' corner, there was one metal folding chair with a paper plate on the floor beside it. "Nora, you're back there," my mother said, pointing. I looked at the folding chair. I looked at the table. Marcus and Kayla had little name cards up at the head, right next to my parents. "I'm 34, I said. "Freeloaders eat at the kids' table." She laughed, one short dry bark, and she aimed it at Aunt Diane, who laughed right back on cue. 10 grown adults heard it. Not one of them said a thing. My uncle stared into his wine. One of the cousins' husbands cleared his throat and mumbled something about the cold snap coming in. I slid my hand into my coat pocket and ran my thumb along the brass edge of my grandfather's pocket level. It was a 6-inch torpedo level he'd carried with him every day of a 38-year career. He gave it to me when I was 16, the day I told him I wanted to build things for a living. It was warm from being against my body and worn smooth from decades in his hands. Chloe walked up next to me with her own plate. She dragged a normal chair over from the hallway and dropped it beside the folding chair. "Looks like we're both stuck at the kids' table," she said, and sat. Before I could answer, my father tapped his glass with a fork. "Before we eat, I've got some news." He stood up at the head of the table, chest out, chin lifted, the pose he always struck when he wanted everyone to swallow whatever he was about to say. "Some of you know I've been talking with a big developer," he said. Well, it's looking real solid now. There's a project coming. Biggest thing this county has seen in 12 years, and Dennis Ashford is going to be part of it. He didn't name the project. He didn't name the developer, but I knew. Everyone at that table had been hearing about the Halstead River Bridge for months. The local station ran a segment on it almost every week. A brand new pedestrian bridge and civic plaza tying downtown to the East Bank, meant to breathe life back into the whole waterfront. People slowed down on their morning drive just to watch the cranes swing. My father wanted a piece of it as a subcontractor. He'd been chasing that thing since summer. What he didn't know, what nobody at that table knew, was who the structural engineer of record was, whose signature was on every set of drawings, whose firm had beaten out 9 other bidders 3 years earlier to win the whole job. The table clapped. My mother lit up. Marcus raised his glass. Now that, my mother said, is real work. And she looked straight at me when she said it. I picked up my fork. That's a huge project, Dad. I hope you're dealing with the right people on it. He frowned, not sure what I was getting at. Then Aunt Diane asked about dessert, and the moment slipped by. I ate my turkey off a paper plate in a folding chair, watching the candles flicker on a table I wasn't allowed to sit at, thinking about the cedar box on the sideboard and what it was going to mean when somebody finally opened it. Aunt Diane caught me in the kitchen while I was topping off my water. So, sweetheart, you still doing that computer thing? Structural engineering, I said. Right, but from home, though. I've got an office and I'm out on sites. She tilted her head the way people do when they've already made up their mind you're not worth a follow-up question. Must be nice not having a real commute. Kayla floated in behind her, reaching for the wine. Saves on gas, at least, she said, and the two of them laughed together. I'd quit correcting people about 4 years earlier. The first time I mentioned landing a contract, my mother steered the conversation straight to Marcus's new car. The second time, I showed my father a photo of a project my firm had just finished, a 4-story medical clinic over in Fairhaven, and he said, "That's nice, honey. Can you pass the salt?" The third time, I tried to actually explain what a structural engineer does all day, and my mother cut me right off. "If you're so impressive," she said, "how come you couldn't even hang on to a husband?" So I stopped. I wasn't hiding my work because I was embarrassed about it. I stopped bringing it up because nobody was listening, and repeating yourself to people who have already filed you under failure is its own special kind of exhausting. I got tired of signing up for it. My mother appeared in the doorway. "Nora, Diane asked you a question." She asked if I work from home. The answer is sometimes. "She can't even tell us where she works," my mother said to Diane, shaking her head slowly. "That should tell you everything you need to know." And it told them exactly what they wanted to hear. That was the whole point. After dinner, once the kids scattered into the den and the adults settled into the living room with their coffee, my mother brought up Tyler. She didn't use his name. She never did anymore. She called him the one who left. "I ran into his mother at the store last week," she announced to nobody and everybody at once, loud enough for the whole room. "She looked wonderful, happy, said Tyler's doing great out in Denver. New job, new girlfriend." She paused to stir her coffee. "I told her we were just glad he found someone more stable." Every adult in that room heard it. Every one. The truth about my divorce was boring and completely undramatic. Tyler got a job offer in Colorado. I had a business anchored in the Midwest. We still loved each other and we let each other go anyway. No affair, no screaming, no courtroom. We signed the paperwork on a Tuesday, and that Saturday he came over and helped me carry a bookshelf up the stairs. But my mother had turned all of that into evidence. Evidence that I couldn't keep a life together. Evidence that something was broken in me at the core. Every time she told it, the story got a little uglier. In her version, I was the one who chased him off by being cold, difficult, obsessed with work that didn't matter to anyone. "Even a good man couldn't stick around," she said, sipping her coffee. "At some point you have to ask yourself what the common thread is, don't you?" The room went quiet. I could feel the second-hand cringe rolling off Uncle Gary's wife. Then Marcus spoke up. "Mom, come on, it's Christmas." It was the first time all night anybody had pushed back on her even a little. He didn't look at me while he said it. but he said it, and it was enough to bounce the conversation onto somebody else. I tucked that away. I stood at the kitchen sink washing a serving dish that was already clean because I needed 2 minutes to myself. Here's the thing about being the family freeloader. It doesn't matter how much you've actually built if the people who slapped that label on you never look up long enough to notice. You turn into the story they tell about you. And if you let them tell it long enough, even you start to believe it's true. I'd driven 4 hours that morning with a cedar box riding on the passenger seat because 3 weeks earlier I'd made up my mind about something. I was going to give them one last shot at seeing me. One clean, quiet chance. No speech. No blow-up. Just the truth, sitting in a box, handed over with both hands. If they took it, I'd know they could still surprise me. And if they didn't, if they pushed it aside or laughed at it or told me to leave, then I'd know something else. I'd know I'd spent my whole adult life asking the wrong people for permission. I glanced through the kitchen doorway at the sideboard. The cedar box was sitting exactly where I'd left it 4 hours before. Nobody had touched it. Nobody had asked about it. It was invisible the same way I was. I dried my hands and went back to the folding chair. Chloe leaned in close. "You okay?" "I'm fine." "You keep staring at that box." "Just thinking." "About what?" I looked at her. She was the one person in the family who'd inherited my grandfather's stubbornness but not the pride that made it dangerous. 23 years old and already braver than most of us combined. "About what happens," I said, "when you stop trying to explain yourself and just show them instead." Marcus ran the room for the next half hour. He always did. He had this talent for sounding important even when he wasn't actually saying anything, a trick our mother rewarded and I'd never picked up. "The BMW's just a lease, but I'll probably buy it out. Fourth quarter was nuts. Kayla and I are looking at a boat for the summer. Nothing wild, just a 24-footer. My mother practically glowed. "That's my boy." Kayla leaned in with her own headline. "And we're going to get the whole family into the biggest event of the year, the Halstead River Dedication Gala on New Year's Eve. Black tie. The mayor's going to be there, the works. I've got a connection." Aunt Diane gasped. Uncle Gary nodded like he approved. My father just about levitated. "That gala's invite-only," he said. "You really have a way in." "Working on it," Kayla said, smiling like it was already handled. While everybody else watched Kayla, I was watching my brother. The hand around his whiskey glass was shaking. Just barely, but enough. He switched the glass to his other hand and shoved the first one into his pocket. When Kayla mentioned the boat, something pulled tight around his eyes. I knew that look. I'd worn it myself. It's the look of a person whose numbers aren't adding up and who can't figure out how to say so at the dinner table. Nobody else caught it. My mother was too busy beaming, my father was already mentally rehearsing his grand entrance at the gala, and Aunt Diane was asking Kayla what she should wear. "Presents next," my mother said, clapping her hands together. "Let's start with Marcus." The cedar box sat on the sideboard. It had been there 5 hours. I wondered if it'd make it to 6. Marcus's gift to our parents was a top-of-the-line massage gun. My mother held it up like it was a trophy. My father read the box twice and pronounced it top of the line. The room applauded like he'd found a cure for something. Then somebody asked, "What about Nora's?" The room went still for a second, the kind of quiet that happens when people suddenly remember you're in it. "Oh," my mother said. She looked over at the sideboard. "Right, the little box." She didn't get up, she just pointed. "Nora, bring it here." I walked over and picked up the cedar box. I'd spent 11 hours making it. I'd picked the wood myself from a lumber yard out in Fairview, the same yard my grandfather used to take me to when I was a kid. I'd dovetailed the corners the way he'd taught me. The hinges were hand-forged brass I'd ordered from a craftsman up in Maine. I set it on the table in front of her. She picked it up, turned it over, felt the weight of it. "Light," she said. She gave it a little shake. Something shifted inside. She wrinkled her nose. "Handmade," she said, the way another person might say second-hand. Then she set it back down without opening it. "We'll get to it later. It's a gift, Mom, you could open it now. Homemade is sweet, honey, but it's not a real present." She pushed it toward the middle of the table, into the pile of torn wrapping paper, and turned to Kayla. Tell me more about this gala. The cedar box sat there in a heap of shredded paper. Nobody opened it. Nobody asked what was inside. I went back to my folding chair and sat down. Chloe put her hand on my arm and squeezed once hard. After the presents came the questions, they always did. It was the part of the night where the family took turns poking at the soft spots of my life, hunting for something that would confirm what they already believed. Do you own your place yet, Aunt Diane? I rent. Still, Uncle Gary, it's a nice rental. Do you at least have health insurance? My mother from across the room. Yes. Through who? You don't have an employer. Through my own company. Your company, she said it the way you'd say your imaginary friend. What is it you actually do, Nora? That one was Kayla, leaning in the doorframe with her wine. She asked it every single year, and every single year she forgot the answer. I design structures, buildings, bridges. On a computer. On a computer, yes, and out on site. Sounds lonely. It wasn't lonely. It was precise and physical, and some mornings genuinely beautiful. But I wasn't about to describe standing on a bridge deck at sunrise watching concrete set to a woman who just called a leased BMW an investment. Every answer I gave was calm, short, and true. Every answer they heard sounded like dodging. The gap between what I said and what they understood was the whole problem, right there. My father wandered in from the hallway, bourbon in hand. Here's the thing, Nora. If your work was real, people would know about it. Marcus's clients take him out to dinner, his name's on stuff. My name's on things too, Dad. On what? Your little laptop? My mother laughed. My father smiled, pleased with himself. I let it go. I was watching them stack up their case for whatever was coming, and I wanted them to finish laying it out before I showed them mine. The TV in the living room was on. It was always on at my parents' house, like a third family member nobody acknowledged. During a lull, the local anchor's voice cut through. The Halstead River Bridge and Civic Plaza is set to open with a dedication gala on New Year's Eve. The project, called the largest public infrastructure investment in Hendricks County in over a decade, has drawn national attention for its innovative design. The screen showed an aerial rendering of the bridge. My bridge. The long, sweeping pedestrian walkway, the observation platform, the plaza sitting where the county's old industrial waterfront used to be. They cut to the cranes on the site. Then the Civic logo with the project partners listed along the bottom. My father jabbed a finger at the screen. That, right there, that's the project I've been telling you all about. The Halstead River thing, Uncle Gary said. Bexley Development Group, they own it. I've been talking with their people since September. There's a subcontractor slot open for the finishing work. This is going to put me right back on the map. He said it with the confidence of a man who had no idea he was standing inside somebody else's building. Big leagues, he added, glancing at me. Nothing your little laptop job would ever get near. The bridge filled the whole screen. My bridge. The one I'd spent 16 months designing and 2 years building. The one where I'd spent 3 sleepless weeks cracking a foundation problem that would have buried a lesser engineer. The one carrying my signature on 380 sheets of structural drawings. I picked up my water glass and took a sip. Looks impressive, I said, and I left it right there, hanging in the warm living room air like a lit fuse. Chloe found me in the hallway 10 minutes later. She grabbed my arm and pulled me over toward the coat closet. I need to ask you something. What? She held up her phone. On the screen was the website for Heartland Builder magazine, their yearly Engineers to Watch feature. The cover photo showed a woman in a hard hat and a high-vis vest standing on a bridge deck, the Halstead River behind her. The woman was me. That's you, Chloe whispered. I've been staring at this for 20 minutes, that's you. I reached over and gently turned her phone face down against her palm. Not tonight. Nora, you're on the cover of a magazine. I know. You're the engineer on that bridge, the one Uncle Dennis keeps. Oh my God, Nora, he doesn't know. Nobody here knows, and I want them to find out a certain way. She studied my face, trying to read the plan hiding behind the comm. She was smart enough not to push it. Okay, she said, your call. Thank you. She started back toward the living room, then stopped. Can I at least be ready? Ready for what? She held up her phone again and tapped the camera icon. In case somebody says something that deserves to be remembered. I looked at her for a long second. Chloe had spent every single holiday sitting next to me at the kids' table, watching the same show I watched, eating off the same paper plates. She knew what this family was capable of. She also knew what I was capable of because she'd actually bothered to ask. "Be ready," I said. She grinned and slipped back into the noise. I was heading toward the dining room when I heard Kayla's voice through the back door. Sharp hissing, the way people fight when they're trying not to be overheard. "Tell them it's next week. Tell them anything, just buy us more time." Marcus's reply was muffled, but I could hear the tone of it. He was begging. Through the glass pane in the door, I could see the two of them out on the porch. Kayla had her coat pulled tight around her shoulders. Marcus was pacing. At one point he stopped and pressed both palms against his forehead, and I recognized the shape of it. It was the posture of a person doing math that refuses to come out right. Kayla stabbed a finger at him. "Fix it, Marcus, I am not the one telling your mother." They came back inside separately. Marcus went straight to the bathroom. Kayla poured herself another glass of wine with a smile that looked painted on. My mother noticed. "Everything all right?" "Perfect," Kayla said. "Just work stuff, you know how the fourth quarter gets." "Oh, I sure do, Marcus works so hard." She said it the way she always did, like a lawyer closing an argument. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The cracks were already showing in the family's favorite story, and I wasn't the one holding the chisel. My mother sent me out to the garage for extra folding chairs. The garage was cold and smelled like motor oil and sawdust, the ghost of my grandfather's workshop that used to fill the back half of it. His workbench was long gone, replaced with shelving units full of plastic bins. But over in the corner, shoved behind a stack of old tires, was a metal toolbox with RASHFORD stenciled on the lid in faded white paint. There was a strip of masking tape across the top. In my mother's handwriting it said, "Throw out." I knelt down and popped the clasps. Inside were the leftovers of a 38-year career in iron. A chalk line reel, 2 cold chisels, a box of layout markers, a pair of spud wrenches worn smooth at the grips. Tools I'd watched him swing 100 times. Under the top tray, taped to the inside of the lid, was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age and soft at the creases. I peeled it free and opened it. His handwriting. The same blocky print he used on drawings. "Nor a girl, build it level, build it true. And never beg the people who couldn't see you." Grandpa, I read it twice, 3 times. I could hear his voice in the letters. He'd written it before he got sick, before the cancer took his appetite, then his hands, then the rest of him. He'd left it in the one place he knew I'd eventually go looking, because he'd known me better than anybody in that house ever had. I folded the note and slid it into my coat pocket, right next to the brass level. Then I grabbed the chairs and headed back in. From the kitchen, I could hear my mother talking about me. I stopped on the basement stairs, a folding chair in each hand, and listened to her explain me to her sister. "I worry about her, Diane, I really do. She's 34, renting a 1-bedroom, driving that truck, and she can't even tell us what she does all day. I grew up with nothing. I married Dennis when I was 21 because I was sick of eating rice every night. Everything I have I scratched and clawed for." "She'll figure it out," Diane said. "She won't, that's what scares me. I watch her going backwards and it makes me sick. I know what backwards looks like, I lived it." There was a pause, a cabinet opened, glasses clinked. "So you push her," Diane said. "Of course I push her. Love isn't soft, Diane, soft is how you stay poor." And there it was, not cruelty just for the sake of cruelty. Fear. The kind of fear that grows up in an empty kitchen and never fully leaves, no matter how much food you eventually pile on the table. My mother wasn't trying to destroy me. She was trying to stop me from turning into the thing she was terrified of, a version of the broke, powerless, invisible girl she'd once been. She was wrong about every bit of it. But standing on those stairs in that cold garage, holding 2 cheap folding chairs, I understood her for the first time in years. Understanding it didn't make it hurt any less. It just made the hurt more specific. "She needs a shock," my mother said. "Tonight, in front of everybody. Maybe if she gets embarrassed enough, she'll finally do something with her life. I set the chairs down quietly on the top step and waited until my heartbeat settled. Then I carried them into the dining room like I hadn't heard a single word. I went back to the folding chair and made a decision. I wasn't going to expose Marcus's debt. I wasn't going to humiliate Kayla. I wasn't going to throw what I'd overheard back in my mother's face or fling my father's bragging back at him. I wasn't going to do any of the things they would have done because I'd spent 10 years watching them do exactly those things to each other, and I knew precisely where that road ended. I was going to tell the truth about myself. Once. Calmly. Then leave. If the truth happened to rearrange the room, if it flipped the seating chart on its head, if it made the folding chair look different, if it put a crack in the story they'd been telling for a decade, that wasn't revenge. That was just what happens when a person stops hiding. I looked at the cedar box, still sitting in the wrapping paper pile where my mother had left it. Nobody had moved it. Nobody had asked about it. It was the most patient thing in the room. "Chloe," I said quietly. She looked up from her phone. "When the time comes, don't stop me. Wouldn't dream of it. And whatever you're recording, that's yours. I won't ask for it." She nodded, serious. "Got it." I reached into my pocket and touched the brass level, then the note behind it. The paper was soft and warm under my fingertips. "Build it level. Build it true. Okay, Grandpa. Here we go." I folded my hands in my lap and waited for my mother to light the match she'd been setting up all night. Dessert was my mother's territory. She'd baked 3 pies, pecan, pumpkin, and cherry, and she handed them out with the focus of a general moving troops around a map. "Marcus, Kayla, you're staying up here at the main table. Everyone else back to your spots." The folding chair again, same corner, same paper plate waiting on the floor. I picked up my fork, then set it back down. "I'll sit at the table," I said. The room froze. "There's no room," my mother said. "There are 2 empty chairs right there." I nodded at the far end of the main table where nobody had sat all night. "Those are for looks. The table fills out better." "They're empty chairs, Mom." I pulled one out and lowered myself into it. I didn't ask. I didn't debate it. I just moved. Her jaw went tight. She shot a look at my father, who was busy chewing pie. "Nora," she said, "I'm sitting here." A beat of silence stretched out. Aunt Diane suddenly found her pecan pie fascinating. Uncle Gary's wife reached for the cream. The kids in the den didn't clock a thing because kids never do. "Fine," my mother said. Her voice had the forced cheer of a pilot announcing turbulence. "Fine. Sit wherever suits you." But she angled her own chair so her shoulder pointed away from me, which was its own kind of seating chart. I ate my pie at the main table for the first time in 6 Christmases. The plate was heavier than I remembered. The napkin was real cloth. Little luxuries that had always been 3 feet away and never once passed to me. Chloe dropped into the folding chair I'd abandoned, grinning. She stood her phone against her water glass, screen aimed at the table, the little recording dot glowing. Chloe was the kind of person who couldn't hold a secret without breaking out in hives. By 8 o'clock, she'd already tried twice to swing the talk back to the bridge. "Uncle Dennis, did you see they closed up the main span last month? The engineering on that thing is unreal." "Course I saw it. I've been on top of that project more than anybody." My father puffed up. "That's my deal, Chloe." "Right. But did you ever look up who the lead engineer is?" I kicked her under the table. She flinched. "Some outfit out of the city," my father said. "Redpoint something, does it matter? The money's in the contracting." "Redpoint Structural Group," Chloe said, looking dead at me. "Chloe," I said, "drop it, I mean it." She shut her mouth. But her hand slid to her phone and tapped the screen twice. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her open the Heartland Builder page, the one with my face on the front, and tilt it low so only I could see. I shook my head. She set the phone back down. "Let them find out the right way," I whispered. "And what's the right way?" "When they decide to actually look." "They're never going to decide to look, Nora, that's the whole problem." She wasn't wrong. But I'd hauled that box 4 hours down the highway. I'd sat in the folding chair. I'd eaten off a paper plate. I'd stood on the stairs and heard my own mother plan my public shaming like it was a favor. If this was going to end, it would end the way I chose. My father leaned back. All right, let's knock out the rest of the presents. That wooden box too, I guess. Might as well get it over with. My mother reached for the cedar box. She held it the way you'd hold a stranger's bag on a crowded bus, 2 fingers, arm extended, already decided it wasn't worth keeping. She turned it over, gave it a small shake. Something slid softly inside. Light, she said. Open it, I said. She scrunched her nose. I know what homemade gifts look like, Nora. It's probably a candle or one of those photo collages. She put it back down. Let's spare ourselves the awkwardness. It's not a candle. It doesn't matter what it is. The point is, she swept her eyes around the table, gathering her crowd the way she always did before handing down a ruling. The point is you show up here every single year with nothing to your name. No house, no husband, no career anyone can actually see, and then you hand us a little wooden box like we're supposed to applaud. She pushed it toward the middle of the table, into the ribbon scraps and torn paper. The cedar caught the candlelight and glowed. The grain I'd sanded for hours. The brass hinges I'd set with my grandfather's tools, 3 coats of oil rubbed in by hand. She shoved it like it was somebody else's trash. Mom, I said, open the box. I don't need to open the box. The whole room was watching now. 19 people, and not one of them said a word. The only sound was the TV still murmuring in the next room, and under it, the faint creak of Chloe adjusting her phone. I leaned back and waited for my father to say the thing I already knew was coming. My mother turned to her audience and delivered the line she'd rehearsed on those stairs. This is exactly what I mean, she said. She gestured at me with one hand, the other resting on the cedar lid like it was Exhibit A, 34 years old, renting, divorced, can't explain what she does for a living, drives a truck that looks like it belongs to a day laborer. And she brings us this little craft project and expects us to clap. She paused, scanned the room. When is she going to stop living off other people? When is she going to stand on her own 2 feet? Then louder so the cousins in the back would catch it. A freeloader who can't even manage her own life. The word hit like a slap. Freeloader. Not the first time she'd used it, but the first time she'd fired it into a full room. The first time she'd planted her flag in it out loud, in front of every aunt and uncle and cousin and stray neighbor's kid who'd wandered in. Nobody spoke. Diane studied the ceiling. Gary's wife pressed her lips flat. Even Marcus dropped his eyes to his plate. Under the table, Chloe's hand found mine and squeezed once. I let the quiet stretch. My grandfather taught me that. He used to say silence carries weight if you let it. Most people can't stand it, so they rush to fill it. I didn't. 5 seconds, 10. My mother crossed her arms, satisfied. She thought the quiet meant she'd won. She thought it was agreement. She didn't understand it was a foundation, and she was standing on the wrong side of it. I looked at the cedar box between us and waited for my father to finish the job. He set his bourbon down. He'd stayed quiet through my mother's speech, not because he disagreed, but because he was waiting his turn. Dennis Ashford never let anyone else have the last word. It was the one skill he'd kept from his years in sales. He picked up the box with one hand and slid it hard across the table toward me. It skated over the cloth and bumped against my water glass. The brass hinges flashed. We don't want your cheap gift, he said. Take it and go. 10 words. Flat like he was handing back a defective product, no heat in it. Just a man deciding his daughter wasn't worth the space she took up at his table. Marcus opened his mouth. I saw it. His lips parted, and for half a second it looked like he might say something. Push back, deflect. Do what he'd done earlier when Mom went after Tyler. Then Kayla touched his arm, and he closed his mouth and looked away. The whole room held its breath. Aunt Diane's hand hovered over her coffee. Gary's wife had her eyes shut. One of the kids poked a head around the doorframe, felt the weather, and vanished. I looked at the box in front of me. The box I'd built out of cedar in my dead grandfather's workshop, with tools he'd left behind for me. The box that held 2 things my parents wanted more than almost anything in the world, if either of them had just bothered to lift the lid. I picked it up, and I laughed. Not bitter, not cruel. A real laugh, the kind that comes up from your chest when something finally clicks into place, clear and ridiculous all at once. Everyone stared. My mother's arms clamped tighter. My father's face went red. Marcus reached for his whiskey and froze halfway. I stood up, slow, holding the cedar box in both hands. My voice came out level, the same voice I use on a job site when something's gone wrong and 20 people are waiting to hear what to do next. Before I go, I said, I've got one question. I set the box down right where my father had pushed it from. Dad, that deal you've been chasing with Bexley Development on the Halstead River project, did anyone ever mention who the structural engineer of record is? His face went empty. What? The engineer, the person whose firm designed the bridge, the one who signs off on every subcontractor before they set foot on the site. Did you ever think to ask? I don't deal with the engineering side of it. Maybe you should have. I reached into my coat pocket and drew out my grandfather's brass level, 6 inches of solid brass, worn glassy from decades of ironwork. I laid it on the table next to the box. Grandpa gave me this when I was 16, I said. Told me to go build things, so I did. I flipped the lid open. The room went quiet again. A different quiet this time, not the embarrassed kind from a minute ago. This was the silence of a room catching up. You keep telling me my job isn't real, I said. I lifted the first thing out of the box, a glossy magazine folded open to the cover. Let's test that. I held it up so everyone could see. My face in a hard hat on the front of Heartland Builder, the headline underneath. My father's glass tipped over. Nobody moved to mop it up. Redpoint Structural Group, I read aloud. Principal and founder, Nora Ashford. Lead structural engineer, Halstead River Bridge and Civic Plaza. I let it hang there. Then I reached back into the box and pulled out 2 heavy cream envelopes stamped with the Bexley logo and the county seal. These are invitations to the dedication gala on New Year's Eve. 2 seats, front row. They're not for sale. They're not offered to contractors. They're issued by the engineer of record, which is me, to the people she chooses to have in the room. I held them up. I drove 4 hours to give these to you. I built this box by hand in Grandpa Ray's shop with his tools because I wanted the gift to actually mean something. I wanted to walk you into the one room this whole family has been dying to get into. My mother had gone white. Her mouth opened and shut, nothing coming out. My father stared at the magazine, then the envelopes, then the TV in the next room still showing the bridge, the color draining from his face as the math finally landed. The project he'd chased for 6 months. The deal he'd bragged about at this very table 2 hours earlier. The subcontractor slot he needed, all of it running across the desk of the woman he'd just told to take her cheap gift and get out. Kayla lunged for the envelopes. I pulled them back. The gala, she whispered. Those are gala tickets. The ones she'd promised the whole family she could deliver. The ones she couldn't. I held up the card I'd written by hand and read it to the room. I built the bridge everyone's talking about. I wanted you in the front row. My mother recovered first. That was always her gift. She could pivot faster than anyone I'd ever met. Why didn't you tell us? Her voice cracked, and for a second it almost sounded like real feeling. All this time, why would you hide something like this from your own family? I didn't hide it, Mom. I told you. 3 times over the last 4 years. You changed the subject every time. I would have remembered. You told me to pass the salt. Well, you should have been clearer. Her voice was climbing now, the rehearsed calm cracking apart, and underneath it was the thing she always reached for, offense. After everything we've done for you, you let us look like fools. You sat here all night and let your father embarrass himself in front of the entire family. Dad embarrassed himself, I said quietly. I just watched. My father's fist came down on the table. Glasses jumped. Enough, he said. You should have told me about Bexley. I've been working that deal for months. I could have what? Called your bluff. You told me to take my cheap gift and get out. That's exactly what I'm doing. Nora, you can't do this to us. I'm not doing anything to you, I'm just done hiding. The room watched. 19 sets of eyes. Aunt Diane's mouth hung open. Gary's wife had tears running down her face, though I doubt she could have told you why. The kids had crept back to the doorway, sensing the charge in the air. My mother's face was scarlet, her hands trembling. My father gripped the edge of the table, and I was calm. I closed the lid and picked the box up. These tickets were a gift, I said. They were my way of saying, "Here, come see what I built. Sit up front, be proud if you can." I tucked the envelopes back inside and shut it. "But you've spent all night telling me who I am, a freeloader. Somebody who can't stand on her own. Somebody whose handmade gift isn't a real present, so I'll respect that." "Nora, wait," my mother started. "These seats are going to people who believed in me before there was a bridge to point at. Grandpa Ray's old Union brothers, the ones who used to leave casseroles on our porch when Dad was out of work. Remember them? They never once called anybody a freeloader." The mention of my grandfather dropped the temperature in the room. My father flinched. Since the old man died, he'd been quietly erasing him from the house. The workshop cleared out, the tools boxed up to be tossed, the stories left to go silent. "I'm done auditioning for a family that already cast me," I said. "I don't need you to understand my work. I don't need you impressed. I just needed to find out if you could open a box from your daughter without turning it into a trial. Now I know." I turned to Marcus. He was staring at his hands, jaw locked. I didn't mention his debt. I didn't mention Kayla's promises. I didn't need to. "Merry Christmas," I said. I grabbed my coat, slid the brass level back into my pocket, held the cedar box against my chest. Then I walked to the door and I didn't hurry. The folding chair was still sitting at the edge of the room, empty. I looked at it as I passed. The metal frame, the vinyl seat, the exact spot it held on the border between the kids' corner and the adults' world. 6 Christmases in that chair. 6 years of paper plates and plastic forks while everyone else ate off the good china. I left it right where it was. They could look at it all night. Chloe was already at the door, coat on, phone in her hand, the recording light steady. She didn't say a thing. She just pulled the door open and walked out beside me. The cold hit my face like someone flipping a switch. December, 18 degrees, wind coming off the river. The kind of night that clears your head whether you asked it to or not. We were halfway to my truck when I heard the front door open behind us. "Nora," my father's voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Nora, wait, let's talk about this." I didn't turn around. I opened the truck and set the cedar box on the passenger seat, the same spot it had ridden that morning. "Nora, please." I climbed in, started the engine, let it idle while the heater warmed up. Chloe sat in her own car watching me through the windshield, her face caught somewhere between pride and grief. I pulled away from the curb. In the mirror I could see my father on the porch in his dress shirt, no coat, arms hanging at his sides. He was still standing there when I turned the corner and he slid out of view. 48 hours later, my phone started ringing. It didn't stop for a week. Chloe posted the video the next morning. Not on social media, she wasn't that reckless. She dropped it into the family group chat, all 37 members, no caption. Just a clip she'd trimmed down to the confrontation. My mother calling me a freeloader, my father shoving the box. Me standing up calm and reading the headline, the invitations, the silence, me walking out. A couple of minutes of footage that rewrote the family story in real time. Aunt Diane called me at 7 in the morning. "Nora, honey, I had no idea. Your grandfather would be so proud." Then Uncle Gary. "We drove past that bridge last week. That's you, that's really you." Then cousins I hadn't talked to in years, one after another like dominoes going down. Texts, voicemails, messages from people I could barely place. The video worked its way through the extended family like a weather front. By afternoon, it had reached the next ring out, my father's old colleagues, church friends, neighbors. Aunt Diane, true to form, had shared it with every person she'd ever met. She wasn't trying to wound my parents. She was trying to brag about the family, and the story was just too good to sit on. Humble niece, gorgeous bridge, ungrateful parents, Christmas dinner disaster. By evening, the calls to my parents had started. From where they stood, the worst part wasn't the video. It was that every single person who saw it asked the same question. "You threw out the woman who built the bridge." That question, hit 40, 50, 60 times over, was what cracked them. And the fact that it was their own family asking made it structural. On December 27th, my father got an email from Bexley Development. He'd been chasing that subcontractor position for 6 months. He'd made calls, sent bids, worked 2 mixers, bought a new sport coat for the occasion. The Halstead River project was supposed to be his comeback. The thing that proved Dennis Ashford still had it. The email was 3 sentences. Thank you for your interest. After review, we've chosen to move in a different direction for the finishing package. We wish you the best. He called the project office. The receptionist was polite. She put him through to the procurement manager, who explained that his application had been flagged at the bonding and insurance stage before it ever reached the technical review. His liability coverage was under the project minimum. His surety bond had lapsed. His bid never made it past the first gate. I found out about the email 2 days later from Chloe. I hadn't contacted Bexley. I'd recused myself from every subcontractor review months earlier, standard practice when you know people in the bidding pool, and I'd flagged the conflict the day I saw his company on the applicant list. I hadn't lifted a finger. I didn't need to. The truth was cleaner and sharper than any revenge I could have cooked up. My father's bid wasn't competitive. His firm was undercapitalized. His insurance was thin. His references were 5 years stale. He'd been leaning on personality to close a deal that ran on paperwork, and the paperwork doesn't lie. The Halstead River project didn't reject Dennis Ashford because his daughter was the engineer. It rejected him because he wasn't qualified. His daughter being the engineer just made it impossible to explain away. He'd told 19 people at Christmas dinner that this deal was his. Now it wasn't, and every one of those 19 people knew exactly why. I didn't have to do anything. They'd built the house themselves. I just stopped holding an umbrella over it. Marcus showed up at my apartment on the 29th. No BMW. He was driving Kayla's Honda. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days, which he probably hadn't. I let him in, made coffee, and didn't say anything, because I'd learned that silence is the fastest road to the truth. He sat at my kitchen table and stared at his hands. The boat was a lie, he said. The fourth quarter numbers were a lie. I've been borrowing from Mom and Dad for the last 8 months. Kayla and I are 240,000 deep, and the company's about to fold. He looked up, eyes red. I clapped for myself so nobody would check my math. I let that sit. The gala, he said. Kayla told everyone she could get tickets. She couldn't. She was hoping to work a connection through Dad's Bexley deal, which he trailed off. Which ran through me, I said. Yeah, you knew. I didn't know the details, but I knew you weren't a freeloader, Nora. I always knew. I was too busy drowning to say it. There was something hard to watch about my older brother admitting that his applause had been armor the whole time. He wasn't evil. He wasn't even all that selfish, not underneath. He was a man who'd been handed a script and performed it until the performance swallowed him. But he'd sat at that table while our mother called me a freeloader and our father told me to get out, and he'd kept his mouth shut when it counted. I can't bail you out, Marcus. That's not what this is. I know, I'm not asking. I'm not your way out, I'm just your sister. He nodded, finished his coffee, and left without asking for anything, which was the most honest thing he'd done in years. My mother called 7 times on December 30th. I let 6 roll to voicemail. The first message was angry. I hope you're satisfied. Your father hasn't eaten in 2 days. The whole family's talking. This is what you wanted, isn't it? The second was bargaining. We can still fix this. Just call Bexley and put in a word for your father. That's all we're asking. The third landed closer to something real. I was scared, Nora. I've always been scared for you. I know I said it wrong. By the fourth, she was crying. Just 1 ticket. 1, I'll sit in the back. I won't say a word. The fifth was my father. I made a mistake. I see that now, but you're our daughter. You can't just cut us off. Talk to me. The sixth was my mother again. We're still your family, Nora. That has to count for something. I listened to all of them sitting at my kitchen table with the cedar box in front of me. It was empty now. I'd taken out the magazine and the invitations and the card, and it was just a box again, cedar and brass, lighter than it had been. On the 7th call, I picked up. Mom. Nora, thank God, listen to me. I'm going to say this once. I'm not angry. I'm not trying to punish anyone. The tickets are going to Grandpa Ray's people. His union brothers, Ed Marsh and Roy Callahan, they believed in me when it cost them nothing, and they never once asked for proof. Silence. Your father needs that Bexley connection, Nora. He needs it. My work stands on its own, Mom, so do I. That's what I was trying to show you. What do you want from us? She asked. Her voice was thin now, stripped of the performance. I want you to see me. I've been right here the whole time. I built a company. I designed a bridge. I made you a gift with my own 2 hands and you shoved it aside because it didn't look expensive enough to count. I didn't know. You didn't ask. That's not the same as not knowing. I could hear my father in the background, murmuring something I couldn't make out. Mom, I'm not closing the door, but I'm done squeezing through the one you keep offering. No more folding chairs, no more paper plates, no more explaining myself to people who already decided I'm not enough. If you want to be part of my life, it starts with respect. Real respect. Not the kind you hand over when someone shows you a magazine cover. The kind you give when someone shows up with a wooden box and you just say thank you. She was quiet for a long time. I could hear her breathing. I don't know how to do this differently, she said. I know, that's what makes it hard. I hung up, not in anger, in clarity. There's a difference. Anger slams the phone down. Clarity sets it down gently and doesn't pick it back up for a while. I pulled my grandfather's note out of my pocket and read it one more time. Build it level, build it true, and never beg the people who couldn't see you. I'd done all three. The bridge was level. The truth was out. And I was done begging. The Halstead River Bridge opened on New Year's Eve under a sky so clear you could see stars above the floodlights. The mayor gave a speech. The county commissioner cut the ribbon. 350 people crossed the bridge for the first time while a local jazz trio played on the observation platform. The river below ran black and silver, and the concrete pylons I designed stood in it like they'd always been there. I gave a short keynote. 5 minutes. I talked about my grandfather, who'd spent his whole life building things for people he'd never meet. I talked about what it means to put your name on a structure that will outlast you. I didn't say a word about my family. In the front row sat Ed Marsh and Roy Callahan, my grandfather's union brothers, both in their 70s, both in borrowed sport coats. Ed was crying before I finished my first sentence. Roy just sat there nodding, the way ironworkers nod when something is plumb. Halfway through, I slipped my hand into my pocket and touched the brass level. It was warm. 2 seats in the second row stayed empty. I'd reserved them under my parents' names just in case. They didn't come. I found out later that my mother had driven to the bridge that afternoon, alone, and sat in her car in the lot for an hour before turning around and going home. I didn't look at the empty seats. I looked at the bridge. My bridge. My parents and I talk now, not often and not easily. We're learning a new language, one that doesn't include folding chairs or paper plates. My mother hasn't called me a freeloader since Christmas. My father hasn't brought up Bexley again. I left the door open, but on my terms. Respect first. Proof, never. Marcus filed for bankruptcy in February. He's selling the BMW. He and I get coffee sometimes. We don't talk about the money. We talk about Grandpa Ray and the workshop behind the garage and the man who left a note in a toolbox for the one grandchild he knew would come looking.